Everybody, this is Dream, and today we're going to do a little breakdown of the Sunday NFL main slate for this week. We have some really fantastic games on the slate. We got a lot of good options at quarterback, some good options at running back, a bunch of options at wide receiver, and a few options at tight end and defense. Obviously, we need to average $6,667 per player on FanDuel, and so we're going to try to do that the best we can here. Overall, I think the slate is pretty solid, and we're going to have plenty of availability on FanDuel to mix and match players to fit inside the salary necessary in order to have a really good, solid line. With that said, when it comes to teams that are how you want to get this lineup in order here, so obviously we have one quarterback, two running backs, three wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, and a defense. This particular week, just based on the pricing on this site, I do think the flex situation should be a wide receiver, and I don't think we should be paying up for super super expensive tight end either. It seems like there's just not a ton of upside on those particular plays, but we have some good value options at tight end, and we have a lot of good options at wide receiver for another flex point. I didn't feel like the running back situation is ideal for that, there's a couple exceptions. So with that said, let's get into this. First of all, let's start at the quarterbacks. Overall, the top option is Josh Allen. He's been playing pretty well so far this season with 33 and 29 fantasy points, as you can see there. And he's pretty much matchup proof. His floor here is 20 fantasy points. It is a little bit of a tough matchup, but he has 29 and 18 versus Miami last season. And so I think he's in a great spot here. The next guy I really like is Lamar Jackson, assuming that he plays because he has potential injury. If he doesn't play, then we should obviously that would be an issue. But if he does play, then he's in a good spot here. He has a lot of upside in this matchup. He is a running quarterback, obviously, which definitely boosts his ability to get points. And he's one of my favorite options on the slate. And his price is pretty reasonable on FanDuel and DraftKings for that matter. Then I like Patrick Mahomes in his matchup against Indianapolis rather. He was not as good in the second game, but he does have the third highest Vegas scoring team for this particular slate, and so I think he's in a really good plus matchup for that. Then Jalen Hurts, who I really like this guy so far this season. I've actually rolled with him both weeks and was rewarded for it, and so this is another week where I think he's useful. His price is a little bit up though, but overall I think he's still a really solid start, especially against Washington, who's not great this season so far. And he also runs the ball some like Lamar Jackson does, so that gives him some upside as well. And then we're going to look at Kyler Murray, who, if you watch the Las Vegas game, he was just doing some masterful stuff in that game, and he has some upside in this game. In the three games that he played against the Rams last season, he had 22, 22, and 6 fantasy points. He's a little bit risky here, but I still think he's in a solid spot. And he's a little bit less expensive, so you can definitely help you pay for some other players. And then I have Kirk Cousins. Now, he hasn't been that good so far this season, but this is the type of game where he could really take advantage of the weak Detroit Lions defense and hopefully have a good game for a change. He has the talent, so it's just a matter of getting it going in the game. His O-line isn't very good, but again, he's playing Detroit this week, and at his price point of $7,600, that could really pay off if he has a big game. Then we have Stafford for the Rams, and again, just another positive defensive situation where he's got 20 to 25 point upside in this matchup, which he did all 3 times last year against Arizona. And his price is, one of the cheaper quarterbacks on the slate that look decent. So he's somebody you got to take into consideration here on this particular match. Then let's go ahead and get into the running backs. And so obviously Austin Eckler is in a great spot. He's getting a bunch of catches too, which just really benefits him. And so I really like him on the slate. Then we have Joe Mixon, who is $8,200. He's a little bit cheaper on DraftKings, but I still like him over here. He does need to have a pretty big game here, but he had 25 points against the Jets last season, and the Jets stink against the run and the pass, so he should be able to get some targets as well, and he should have a big day regardless of what you think about about him specifically. Then we'll look at DeAndre Swift. Now he potentially should play, we think, and so if he does play, then he's going to be a top tier option against Minnesota. He has plenty of upside here, and he has touchdown potential in this game as well. Plus, sometimes he gets some catches for some yards, so that's always a benefit. Then Leonard Fournette. Now this is an interesting situation. He basically went on Twitter and said that he is going to score a bunch of points and he said he was sorry to his fantasy users, and his price has come down quite a bit. So I really think he's in a good spot here, even though, especially against Green Bay, he's not very good against the run, and so I think he's in a top tier spot, and he's one of my favorite running backs on the slate because he's motivated. Then we'll look at David Montgomery for Chicago, and he's in a really good spot here against Houston. He should get 15 to 17 rush attempts and around 100 yards in this game against bad defense. Really think he's in a solid spot. And then we'll look at Michael Carter. Where are you at? For the Jets. Now this is a little bit of a tougher matchup for him, but he has some upsides too. That he's got, he can get 7 to 10 carries, and he's going to get some catches in this particular game. He's been targeted 5 and 9 times the first 2 weeks, so he's kind of got some upside because of that. Now the catch, and his price is really inexpensive, so he's somebody you can pay down for at running back if you want to. Not the most ideal situation, but he's still somebody. It's hard to find a lot of guys sub 6,000 that can actually produce on this particular site, so he's somebody to take a look at. And then we have Antonio Gibson from Washington. Now, this guy is basically, he's really got to get a touchdown to pay off. There's no guarantee that he's going to get the targets in this particular matchup against Philadelphia. Philly's got a pretty stingy defense, and so he does need to get some catches and a potential rushing touchdown in order to really pay off here. But he does have the capability on this one. Then Aaron Jones for Green Bay. He's in the very same situation that Gibson is in. He's got to really have the opportunity to get the touchdowns. In last week's game, he actually had a return touchdown, and he had a rushing touchdown, and he had 130 yards. It'd probably be a little bit harder to get 130 yards. Look for more like his first week against Minnesota, where he had about 10 fantasy points. But I think he could get a touchdown in this game, so he could get a little bit over that. But he does need a touchdown to really probably pay off on this particular slate. And then I have Miles Sanders for Philly. Now he's in a really good spot here, but he's still going to need, he's still going to get 13 to 15 rushes probably in this game and 70 yards. But he really give you a bonus if he could get the touchdown as well. And then finally at this position, Damian Harris for New England. Obviously, Baltimore is a tough team sometimes against the rush, but he has some upside in this match because it'll be a game where both teams are going to run the ball some, and he does have some potential to get some backfield catches, and he's somebody to take a look at a pretty cheap price at running back. If he can get 10 carries, he'll get around 50 or so yards, and if he can get a touchdown out of that, then that will help him pay off. Before I get to wide receiver, I'm just going to run through the tight ends real quick. So Travis Kelce is always obviously a top option. Now, he's a little bit limited in the yards in the second game, and this is going to be a little bit of a tougher game, but he should get 7 or 8 targets, and I suspect that he'll get somewhere between 10 and 15 fantasy points in this particular matchup. Obviously, we would probably like a little bit more than that, but it's not... I don't think that Mahomes is going to have to go to him as much as he does sometimes in this matchup. So the next guy is Mark Andrews, and obviously he is very dependent on if Jackson does in fact play, which I think he will, but I still think that's dependent on that. His price is a little bit high on FanDuel, but he's still becoming a favorite target for Jackson, and he's definitely going to need him in this particular matchup, and so I think he's a top tier option at tight end. However, I think he's a little bit safer on FanDuel or on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel. Then we have Darren Waller for Las Vegas, who's quickly becoming a favorite for Derek Carr, and he does need to get a touchdown to make real good here, but he should still get 7 or 8 targets in this game. And while Tennessee does have a little bit of a stingy defense at times against the pass, I think he's going to have an opportunity for touchdown here, and he's one of my favorite options on this particular slate. Then we have Goddard for Philly, He's another guy I really like against Washington, and he's super dependent on getting a touchdown because he doesn't get as many targets as some of the other guys. And then finally, Tyler Higbee for I'd spell his name for the Rams. He's in a good spot here, and he does get some targets, but he's not really he doesn't get as many yards as some of the other guys. So what we need is to get down to, if you want to use him, his price is going to make it useful, but he does need to score a touchdown to really pay off in this particular situation. And at defense, I really have three teams to take a look at here. First being the Cincinnati Bengals, and they're also pretty inexpensive on this particular slate at $3,600 against the Jets. I mean, the Jets are just bad. I mean, that's all you can say. And while they haven't scored a ton of fantasy points so far this season, this is going to be a situation where they're going to have some opportunity. Then, of course, the Bears against Houston, another team that they're going to have a really good chance to have a good game against. And they've had one good week and one average week, but I think they're going to have some upside in this particular matchup. And then finally, the New Orleans Saints against Carolina. Obviously, another situation where they're going to have some opportunity to score. They didn't have some real big weeks the first 2 weeks, but I think they're in a good spot here to have a quality week. So with that said, that's what I have for this week. I think we have a really good option at defense. Now I'll get into the wide receivers. The reason I left these guys for last is because there's quite a few of them. I'm just going to run through them and not really click on each one. You can see the fantasy points per game on each guy here, and I'll scroll through this as I go. So obviously Cooper Kupp, he's been great in the first 2 weeks. In the 3 games last year against Arizona, he had 34, 17, 11 fantasy points. Definitely makes him a top-tier option. Justin Jefferson's in a great spot here. He's been solid so far this season in 2 games with 38 and 22 points. And then, obviously, in this situation here against Detroit, that's a huge advantage. Then Devontae Adams for Las Vegas, excuse me. He has to throw through the air in this one because it's going to be probably a high-scoring game. And so I look for him to be a good option. And even though Tennessee is kind of good against the wide receivers, they're going to have a tough time with him because he's kind of matchup-proof. Then we have Stephon Diggs, who's 8,300 over here. He's a top receiver for Josh Allen, and this stack with him and Josh Allen will be pretty popular. Not as popular on FanDuel because of the price, but a little bit more on DraftKings because Stephon Diggs is cheaper over there. Then Jamar Chase for Cincinnati against the Jets. He's in a very good option this week, and his floor will be lower than some of the other options, but his price is a little bit high. But he is still somebody you have to consider against the Jets because, well, it's the Jets. And then we have Tyreek Hill for Miami. He proved last week that he can actually be a top-tier wide receiver with Miami. And so his price is kind of down on DraftKings, but he's a little bit more expensive on FanDuel. But he's still matchup-proof here, and I think he's got a high-scoring opportunity again this week. I do think this Miami-Buffalo game is going to have a lot of points. A.J. Brown for... Why are we... Let's do this. For Philadelphia, he's in a great spot against Washington. He has been somewhat inconsistent, but he has some good upside here. He's a little bit cheaper than some of the other options. Amon-Ra St. Brown's a guy I really like against Minnesota. He's had 2 really big games already this season. I look for him to have another one. His price is a little bit less expensive than the other guys I mentioned so far, and he's somebody that's been targeted over 10 times each week, and I really look for him to continue that. Then I got Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks has some tough option here against the against Chicago Bears, but he does have some upside at his price because he gets about 10 targets a game, and you'll look for him to get 10 to 15 fantasy points. T. Higgins obviously needs a touchdown to really help him, but he should still get 7 to 10 targets, and so at his price point, he's somebody to take a look at. And then finally, Marquise Brown is a good option at $7,000 against the Rams. He's going to get around 10 fantasy points and about 7 to 8 targets, and so I like him. A few other guys I'm going to mention, I'm just going to roll through these, are guys that are a lot cheaper, and they're really touchdown dependent. but you could utilize them as your flex option. So Garrett Wilson for the Jets, he's averaging 16 fantasy points a game so far this season. He gets some targets and he's a value play if he can get a touchdown. Curtis Samuel is a guy I really like for Washington. He's in a great spot against Philly, and if he can get a touchdown, then he's going to be somebody that's going to be worthwhile. Same with Drake London. He definitely needs a touchdown if he's going to pay off here, but he has 20-point upside if he has a big enough if he gets involved in the offense. And then Rashad Bateman, I actually really like him with if Jackson plays because we're going to throw to the ball some on this game. Obviously, he's a kind of a boomer bust option, but I still think he's in a good spot here. Adam Thielen has come down in price, and that's going to be beneficial to us. He hasn't scored much in the first 2 weeks, but now he gets to face the Detroit Lions, and obviously that's going to be a coming out party for him. And so I think he's a great option at $6,000. And for a sub $6,000 option, we have Hunter Renfrow for Las Vegas. Now, if he plays, then he's definitely going to be somebody to consider. He should be able to get 7 to 10 fantasy points at his price point, but he does need to get a touchdown to really pay off. With that said, I think we have a really solid options at every position. And if there's anybody on the slate you think I've left out, feel free to leave those comments below. And thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing, and have a nice day.